Hi FBC kids!
Hi everybody!
Today we're going to share with you one of my favorite stories in the entire Bible, and that's the story of Joseph. It's a story where God takes a very hard situation and he turns it into good. So we're going to read for you the story of Joseph in the Jesus Storybook Bible, and then we have a quick science demonstration for you. So this story is called The Forgiving Prince. Jacob had 12 sons, but all of his sons, out of all of them, Joseph was his favorite. One day, Jacob gave Joseph a splendid new robe. It was beautiful and rich with all the colors of the rainbow, but it made Joseph's brothers jealous. They wanted rich rainbow robes too. Then, to make matters worse, Joseph kept on having these special dreams. I dreamed I was the greatest. I was king, Joseph told his brothers, and you all bowed down to me. Now, I'm sure you know, even if Joseph didn't, that telling your brothers things like that isn't a very good idea. Joseph's brothers hated him even more. They wanted to kill Joseph and his dreams. And one day, that's exactly what they tried to do. They tore Joseph's rainbow robe off him and sold him to slave traders for 20 pieces of silver.
The traders took Joseph to Egypt and made him into a slave. The brothers went home and lied to their father, telling him that Joseph was dead. That's the end of that dreamer, they thought, but they were wrong. God had a magnificent dream for Joseph's life, and even when it looked like everything had gone wrong, God would use it all to help make the dream come true. God would use everything that was happening to Joseph to do something good. Meanwhile, though, things were now not looking good for Joseph in Egypt. He was far from home and far from his dad. Then he got blamed for something he didn't do, and even though he had done nothing wrong, he was punished and thrown in jail. But God had not left Joseph.
One night, Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, had a scary dream about thin cows gobbling up fat cows. What on earth did it mean? He didn't know, but Joseph was a dream expert, so Pharaoh sent for him. It means a famine is coming, Joseph explained. There won't be enough food. Pharaoh was so pleased by Joseph's skill that he immediately took Joseph out of jail and made him a prince. Now back home, Joseph's brothers had run out of food and everyone was hungry. God's special family was in danger. If they didn't get food soon, they would starve to death. So Joseph's brothers traveled to Egypt to buy food.
They came and knelt before the new prince. His brothers didn't know that the prince was Joseph, but Joseph knew who they were. Joseph's dream, the one about his brothers bowing down to him, was coming true. "It's me," Joseph cried. When they saw it was Joseph, his brothers were afraid. They had wronged Joseph. They had sinned, and they knew it. Now Joseph would certainly punish them. But Joseph looked at his brothers, and his eyes filled with tears. Even though his brothers had hurt him and hated him and wanted him dead, in spite of everything, he couldn't stop loving them.
His heart, which they had broken, filled up with love, and Joseph forgave them. Joseph threw his arms around them. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Behind what you were doing, underneath everything that was happening, God was doing something good. God was making everything right again." Joseph didn't punish them, he rescued them. He brought God's special family to live safely with him in Egypt. One day, God would send another prince, a young prince whose heart would break. Like Joseph, he would leave his home and his father. His brothers would hate him and want him dead. He would be sold for pieces of silver. He would be punished even though he had done nothing wrong. But God would use everything that happened to this young prince, even the bad things, to do something good, to forgive the sins of the whole world. And I just love that story because Joseph had such a hard life, and God somehow took everything in his life and he had to have it happen so that something good could come out of it, so that Joseph could save his family and be part of God's plan that hundreds of years later, when Jesus came, just like the story said, he would come rescue us from our sins. So now we're going to do a science experiment that kind of shows how God can take bad things and turn them into good. We're going to start our experiment by pouring some milk into the bottom of this dish. We just want the milk to cover the whole bottom. So we know that in the beginning of our story that we just read, that Joseph had a pretty good life, right? His dad loved him. His dad gave him this beautiful coat that was rainbow colored, just like these colors. He had dreams that said he was going to be great someday. His life was pretty good. So we're going to take these colors and put them in the center of our dish here. Unfortunately, in the middle of Joseph's story, things didn't look so great for him. He was away from his home, blamed for something he didn't do, put in prison, forgotten about. Sometimes we might feel forgotten about too and kind of stuck, maybe even now. His life, do you see how all these colors blended together? It just kind of looks like a little bit of a mess. Joseph might have felt like he was in a deep pit. Sometimes we might feel like our lives are a little bit of a mess. But God, Joseph talks about, God did not forget about Joseph. God had a plan all along, and he needed to make Joseph's life messy in order for the rescue to happen, in order for good to happen. Joseph said that even though his brothers tried to harm him, God intended it for good to accomplish what was done, saving many lives. So here's what I'm taking this dish soap. Going to put some dish soap on the Q-tip, and we're going to stick it in the center into the middle of our mess and see what God can do. God can take our messes and turn them into something beautiful. Here we go. Isn't that awesome how he took that mess in the middle and his power throughout? He had this in mind the entire time. Joseph said, you intended to harm me and my brothers, but God intended it for good. So this mess can be turned into something beautiful. Romans 8:28 says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose.
We may not understand why God allows some things to happen in our lives, but we can always trust him. When we love Jesus, we know that he is always working for our good.
So we just want to challenge you this week to look for ways that you see God working. What can you thank God for doing this week? Just like our story about Joseph and our science experiment, we know that in all things, God has a greater plan and he's working for good. We love you guys, and we hope you have a great week.